On January 3, 2026, the world was stunned by a development that would send shockwaves through international politics and upend the lives of millions. News outlets across the globe interrupted regular programming to deliver the story. A dramatic military operation had just unfolded in South America, and its consequences would soon reach the heart of New York City. In a bold and controversial move, U.S. forces captured Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro and his wife in Caracas, ending a tense standoff that had gripped the region for weeks. The images of soldiers in the streets and armored vehicles outside the presidential palace quickly became symbols of a new era of uncertainty. The operation, codenamed Absolute Resolve, was announced by President Trump in a televised address. He declared it a victory for democracy and a necessary step to restore order in the Western Hemisphere. But the world was divided. Allies and adversaries alike condemned the action, and protests erupted in cities from Buenos Aires to Berlin. The United Nations called for an emergency session, while social media exploded with outrage and confusion. For New York City, the crisis hit home in an unexpected and dramatic way. Within hours, Maduro and his wife were secretly flown to a federal detention center in Brooklyn, escorted by a heavily armed convoy. The city's skyline, already a symbol of resilience, now became the backdrop for an international incident that would test the limits of local and federal authority. This unprecedented event thrust newly inaugurated Mayor Zohran Mamdani into the heart of an international firestorm just days into his term. Barely settled into office, Mamdani faced a crisis that no mayor in modern history had ever encountered: a global conflict playing out on his city's streets. Mamdani, a democratic socialist and outspoken advocate for human rights, condemned the operation as an act of war and a violation of both U.S. and international law. He called for immediate transparency, accountability, and respect for due process, even as federal officials pressured City Hall to cooperate. His stance set up a direct and highly public confrontation with the White House, highlighting the stakes for New York's diverse communities. Immigrants, activists, and everyday New Yorkers watched anxiously, knowing that the city's response could shape national debate and global perceptions. The crisis would test not only Mamdani's principles, but also the city's values and the boundaries of federal power. Every decision carried weight, from legal challenges to public statements, as the mayor and his team navigated a maze of political, ethical, and legal dilemmas. This story explores the mayor's response in the face of overwhelming pressure, the legal and moral arguments that shaped the city's actions, and the profound impact on New Yorkers from all walks of life. In living rooms, courtrooms, and city streets, the crisis became personal. At its core, this is a story about one city's stand in the face of global upheaval, a test of leadership, community, and the enduring spirit of New York in a world turned upside down. Zohran Mamdani, inaugurated as New York City's mayor in 2026, is a figure who has quickly become synonymous with bold, transformative leadership in the city. His election marked a turning point, not just for New York, but for progressive politics across the country. Representing a new era of progressive leadership, Mamdani's campaign energized a broad coalition of young voters, working families, and longtime activists who were eager for change. His vision for New York is rooted in social justice, inclusivity, and a deep commitment to uplifting marginalized communities. A proud democratic socialist and former state assembly member, Mamdani built his career fighting for affordable housing, reliable public transit, and the rights of immigrants. He became known for his hands-on approach, marching in protests, organizing community forums, and drafting legislation that put people first. His background as the son of Ugandan immigrants gave him a unique perspective on the challenges faced by newcomers and working-class families in New York. Growing up in Queens, one of the most diverse places in the world, shaped his lifelong commitment to equity, justice, and an anti-interventionist foreign policy that puts people over politics. As mayor, Mamdani's administration prioritizes diplomacy, human rights, and the well-being of ordinary people over military action or political grandstanding. He believes that true leadership means listening to the needs of the community and acting with compassion. He views aggressive foreign policy as a distraction from the urgent local needs facing New Yorkers every day, like poverty, crumbling infrastructure, and the struggle to afford basic necessities. When news of Maduro's capture broke, Mamdani's opposition was immediate and unwavering, a reflection of his core beliefs and his refusal to let international conflicts overshadow the needs of his city. For Mayor Mamdani, global events are always local. He sees it as his duty to protect New Yorkers, especially those most vulnerable to the ripple effects of international crises, and to ensure that the city remains a beacon of hope, safety, and opportunity for all. Operation Absolute Resolve was a massive U.S. military strike in Caracas, executed with precision and secrecy. Elite special forces, aided by covert intelligence, captured Maduro and his wife before dawn and flew them to New York. The White House framed the mission as a blow against a narco-terrorist regime, but critics saw it as a dangerous escalation. The Justice Department unsealed sweeping indictments, charging Maduro and his family with narco-terrorism and conspiracy. The administration invoked Article 2 powers to bypass Congress, citing controversial legal precedents. The operation's legality and its impact on international norms were immediately questioned worldwide. For New York, the arrival of the captured leaders made the global crisis intensely personal. Mayor Mamdani denounced the operation as an illegal act of war, not a law enforcement action. He argued it violated both U.S. constitutional limits by bypassing Congress and the United Nations Charter's prohibition on unilateral force. Mamdani warned that ignoring international law sets a precedent for unchecked power and global instability. He saw the strike as a regime change operation driven by economic interests, not democracy. Such interventions, he argued, destabilize regions and harm civilians, both abroad and in immigrant communities at home. Mamdani's stance was rooted in a belief that the U.S. cannot dictate other nations' leadership by force. For him, upholding law and morality was essential to global peace and New York's integrity. Mamdani didn't just criticize from afar, he called President Trump directly before the operation was public. Briefed in advance due to New York's role, Mamdani urged the president to reconsider, warning of legal and humanitarian disaster. After the strike, he made his opposition public, showing he'd acted both privately and publicly to stop it. This direct challenge set a new tone for city-federal relations and underscored Mamdani's willingness to confront power. His actions positioned him as a national voice of dissent in a moment of crisis. The world split sharply over the U.S. strike. At the United Nations in New York, emergency meetings were called as Russia, China, and Latin American nations condemned the action as a violation of sovereignty. The European Union criticized the lack of international sanction, while U.S. allies like the UK and France cautiously welcomed Maduro's removal. Some countries, torn between opposition to Maduro and concern over U.S. intervention, issued mixed statements. The operation fractured global alliances and raised fears of wider conflict. New York, as host to the UN, became a focal point for diplomatic fallout. The city's leadership was now entangled in a global debate over law, power, and legitimacy. In Venezuela, Maduro's capture triggered chaos and defiance. Vice President Delcy Rodriguez denounced the U.S. strike, declared a state of emergency, and was sworn in as interim president. The government mobilized the military and broadcast anti-American rallies, fueling national resistance. Caracas was gripped by fear. Power outages, food shortages, and uncertainty spread rapidly. Armed colectivos mobilized, raising fears of internal conflict, while opposition leader Maria Corina Machado called for recognition of Edmundo González Urrutia as president. The country faced a three-way power struggle: Maduro loyalists, democratic opposition, and U.S. intervention. Venezuela's crisis deepened, with the risk of civil war looming. The world watched as the nation teetered on the edge. The crisis reverberated through New York's Venezuelan community, sparking celebration, fear, and fierce debate. Some exiles cheered Maduro's capture, hoping for change. Others condemned the U.S. intervention as a violation of sovereignty. Rallies and protests erupted across the city, reflecting the community's deep divisions and anxieties for loved ones back home. Mayor Mamdani acknowledged these tensions, pledging to protect all New Yorkers regardless of political views. For many, the crisis was not distant, it was personal, shaping daily life and identity. The city became a microcosm of Venezuela's turmoil. In the wake of Maduro's dramatic capture, the world was thrust into a period of intense uncertainty and anxiety. The images of armed soldiers escorting the Venezuelan leader sent shockwaves through international media. and the streets of Latin American cities buzzed with tension. As governments scrambled to respond, the global community watched, unsure of what would come next. Amid this chaos, Mayor Mamdani emerged as a principled and unwavering opponent of military adventurism. He stood before the press, resolute, calling for restraint and a return to the rule of law, even as emotions ran high and calls for retaliation grew louder. His bold condemnation of the military strike as both illegal and reckless put him at direct odds with the White House. This act of defiance, rare among city leaders, quickly made him a national figure and a lightning rod for debate. Mamdani's arguments, rooted in international law, deep moral conviction, and a genuine concern for the lives of innocent civilians, resonated powerfully with many New Yorkers. His message echoed far beyond the city, inspiring people across the country who were searching for leadership grounded in principle. The crisis fractured the international order, deepened Venezuela's turmoil, and exposed deep divisions within New York's own communities. At the United Nations, diplomats debated fiercely, while in Caracas, citizens took to the streets, demanding justice and stability. In New York, neighborhoods found themselves split, with passionate voices on all sides. Protests erupted across the city, reflecting widespread unease and anger with the president's actions. Demonstrators marched for peace, their chants echoing through the avenues, while police maintained a tense watch over the crowds. In response, Mamdani doubled down on his commitment to diplomacy, the rule of law, and the well-being of his constituents. He met with community leaders, listened to their fears, and worked tirelessly to build consensus in a city on edge. By challenging Operation Absolute Resolve, Mamdani positioned New York as a rare counterweight to the use of unilateral force. His leadership offered a vision of a city and a nation guided by justice, not just power. The long-term consequences of this moment remain uncertain. Yet Mamdani's courageous stand has already left a mark, shaping the course of history and reminding the world that even in times of turmoil, the law and the voice of the people matter.